103-pound shoemaker walked into the wilderness in 1884 with 26 pounds total on his back, stayed 6 weeks, and came out better fed and better rested than most people who go in today carrying 3 times that weight. His name was George Washington Sears. The outdoor world knew him as Nessmuk. He was not a minimalist as a lifestyle choice. He carried 26 pounds because he understood what to do with bark, ash, a strip of cloth, and a dead pine stump. The knowing weighed nothing. The gear it replaced weighed everything. Picture the average trailhead today. 70-liter pack, $400 tent, titanium cookware, 3 separate fire-starting devices, and no working knowledge of how to keep coals alive through a cold night. That person will stack river stones into a ring, light a fire inside it, and believe they are connected to something ancient. They are not. They are following a catalog's version of what old looks like. Here is what makes this worth your time. The man with 26 pounds was safer, warmer, and better fed than the man with 70. And that stone fire ring you were told is the traditional way, the people who actually lived outside would have scattered it before they sat down. I am going to show you exactly why and what they did instead. 25 skills, counted down to 1. Some of what is on this list was quietly restricted by federal land agencies. Some of it was confirmed superior by university research within the last 10 years. Some of it can be done by fewer than 400 people alive on this continent right now. None of it stopped working. It just became inconvenient for the people selling you replacements. Before we go further, if this kind of thing matters to you, hit subscribe on my channel. We pull buried practical knowledge back into daylight, and the next one goes even deeper. Let's go. Skill 25. Reading tomorrow's weather from tonight's sky. Your great-grandfather looked west every evening before he spread his bedroll. He read the pattern of high cirrus cloud, the ring forming around the moon, the way the wind shifted at dusk, and he picked his ground accordingly. It cost him nothing. A rural weather report in 1935 ran about a nickel. The open sky ran free. Then came the pocket radio, then the smartphone app. The Weather Channel launched in 1982 and turned forecasts into content you consumed rather than a sky you read yourself. Nobody outlawed a wool blanket. They just stopped teaching you that wet wool outperforms a soaked synthetic bag in cold conditions. Military mountain warfare research confirmed that as recently as 2017. Skill 23. The double wrap wool bedroll. 2 wool blankets, one beneath, one over, cross-tucked at the feet, pinned at the shoulder with a single horse blanket pin. A field manual published in 1906 described the method in detail, and those notes still exist in archive. A good Army surplus wool blanket cost under $3 in that era. A sleeping bag rated to the same temperature starts at $180 today. A major textile research program confirmed in 2016 that wool holds 80% of its insulating value when soaked. Synthetic fill drops below 50% under the same conditions. A wet wool bedroll still functions. A wet synthetic bag becomes a liability. Warmth is set. Now the shelter above it. Skill 22. Why you should never build a stone fire ring. This is the picture from the opening. That circle of river stones you stack around a campfire is precisely what experienced outdoor people would not do. 2 reasons, and both of them matter. River stones hold moisture deep in their structure. Heat them quickly, and that trapped water turns to steam. The pressure builds, and the stone fractures. National park advisories and geological survey publications both documented injuries from stone fragments in campfire situations, including a serious eye injury at a national park as recently as 2011. Second reason, a stone ring is a heat sink. It draws warmth away from your fire and radiates it outward into empty air, away from you. The old method was a flat ash bed with a log reflector angled behind the fire toward the shelter entrance. No ring. All the heat directed where it mattered. Leave No Trace launched in 1978 and gave the stone ring a bad name while stove companies filled the gap. One major outdoor equipment brand had been patenting fuel-burning stoves since 1900 and shifted to propane mid-century. They did not need a regulation. They needed you to believe the ring was the legitimate way so you would feel guilty enough to buy the alternative. Reflector fire on flat ash ground. That is the original method. Everything from here is a pattern. Ask yourself on each one, who profits when I do it their way? Skill 21. Banking coals for morning fire. Bury a solid hardwood coal in a deep bed of its own ash. Pack it tight. Leave it. 10 hours later, scrape the ash aside and you have a living ember you can blow back to flame in under a minute. It costs nothing. Matches cost a penny a box in 1930. A butane lighter today runs close to $2 and fails when it gets wet. Wildland fire crews are still taught the coal banking method in forestry field guides published in 2020. The propane industry did not outlaw the banked coal. They just made sure every advertisement from 1955 onward showed a man clicking a fuel igniter, and the old knowledge faded from disuse. Ash holds memory. Now the structure it heats. Skill 20. The 2-pole canvas lean-to. 2 saplings, 1 ridgepole, 6 feet of oiled canvas. 30 minutes of work and you have a functional angled shelter positioned to catch heat from the reflector fire. Materials sourced from the ground around you cost nothing. A 2-person backpacking tent in an outdoor catalog ran $17 in 1965 and $400 today. A naturalist who spent 3 decades in the southern Appalachians documented the lean-to method in a 1906 handbook based on what mountain people were already doing. The textile industry did not outlaw that book. They just stopped stocking oiled canvas after synthetic fabric patents took hold in the late 1930s. By the early 1950s, every troop leader had switched to a pup tent. Federal Forest Products Research still publishes lean-to construction plans for trail crews. 2 poles, a ridgeline, a roof. Done. Now the material that made it work. Skill 19. Rendered fat in a tin. 1 pound of bacon grease rendered clean was standard field issue in Depression-era Conservation Corps programs. 1 pound per man per week because it fried the pan, waterproofed canvas seams, conditioned leather boots, and added calories and flavor to every meal. Cost was the drippings you would have thrown out. Today, a specialty grocer sells rendered lard for $12 a jar. A Federal Agricultural Bulletin from 1936 explained the rendering process step by step, and that document is still archived and available. Nobody banned bacon grease. A major shortening brand spent decades from 1911 onward telling the American public that animal fat was dangerous, and by 1985 most people were pouring pan drippings down the drain. Food science research published in 2018 confirmed that rendered lard has a fat profile that outperforms the shortening that replaced it. Fat in the pack, calories built in. Skill 18. Parched corn. Field corn, dry toasted in a cast iron skillet until it hardens. Keeps a full year in a cloth bag, softens as you chew, 3,000 calories per pound, no refrigeration required. Cost about 8 cents a pound to prepare in 1935. A modern trail food with equivalent calorie density runs $11 for the same weight today. Indigenous and Appalachian communities both used parched corn going back 4 centuries. Nobody made it illegal. Breakfast cereal patents took hold in the 1920s, and by mid-century, corn had been relocated from the field kit to a wax paper box with a cartoon on the front. Agricultural extension research confirmed in 2014 that parched corn outlasts most commercial trail bars for shelf stability. Iron skillet, field corn, cloth bag, calories done. Now something to wash them down. Skill 17. Boiling water in a birch bark cup. Birch bark does not ignite below the waterline. That fact alone makes it functional as a boiling vessel. You fold a bark cup, fill it with water from the creek, set it at the edge of the coals, and the water boils before the bark catches. It costs a strip of deadfall bark. A titanium cup in the ultralight catalog runs $42. National Park Junior Ranger programs still teach this exact method in 2022 using deadfall bark from already fallen trees. The knowledge did not disappear, the outfitter just needed you not to know it. Water hot, now the fire beneath it. And here is where the number gets very small. Skill 16. Fatwood and pine pitch fire starting. The heartwood of a rotted pine stump is saturated with
It splits into a wedge the size of your fist and burns like a road flare even in driving rain. Frontier woodsmen called it fatwood or lighter pine and lit fires with a single strike in conditions that would shut down a modern propane torch. The cost was the walk to the wood line. One major outdoor equipment company had been selling gasoline lanterns since 1900 and moved through kerosene, white gas, and propane over the following decades. A federal forest products study from 2003 documented the exact resin content of southern pine heartwood. Fatwood gathering from deadfall is legal on most federal land. The pitch that lit your ancestors' fire is still sitting in the ground where they left it. Here's the second pattern. Every skill in this section replaces something a company needs you to purchase on a recurring basis. That is not a conspiracy, that is a revenue model. Keep that in mind as we go lower on the list. Skill 15, the one-match fire. And after that, the no-match fire. A serious outdoorsman writing in 1906 said plainly that anyone who could not start a fire with one match in the rain had no business being outside. Cost of a match in 1906 was a fraction of a cent. Today, a waterproof survival match in the emergency prep aisle runs 30 cents per stick. Nobody outlawed a standard match. They wrapped it in wax, called it survival, and charged 400% more. The one-match fire requirement was removed from a major youth outdoor program's Wilderness Skills Badge in 1972. That is documented in their handbook revision records. Conservative estimates from bushcraft instructor associations put the percentage of adults under 40 who can do it in wet conditions below 8%. One match, one dry tinder bundle, skill. Skill 14, 3 knots and only 3. Bowline, tautline hitch, clove hitch. A founding scouting manual from 1908 included these 3 as the core working knots every young person should learn. American youth organizations taught them consistently until the merit badge curriculum modernized quietly through the 1990s. Bowline never slips under load and never jams when you need to release it one-handed. Tautline adjusts a shelter guideline without hardware. Clove hitch starts every lashing you will ever tie. A plastic line tensioner in today's catalog does what a tautline hitch does for $3.50 per unit. The United States Coast Guard Working Seamanship Manual still lists these 3 as the functional core in its 2019 edition. Velcro was patented in 1955. The hardware fastener market did the rest. 3 knots, 1 rope, no purchase required. Now the tool that cuts the rope. Skill 13. One carbon steel knife kept sharp. A working-class knife made from high-carbon steel in the mid-1800s held an edge that most $300 modern folders cannot match. Carbon steel requires attention. It will rust if you neglect it, so the outdoor industry shifted to stainless steel in the 1960s, which is harder to put a proper edge on and holds that edge less effectively. Not banned, marketed against. Bladesmithing associations and knife-making schools still teach carbon steel edge geometry. A material science study published in 2017 confirmed that carbon steel outperforms comparable stainless steel in edge retention at equivalent hardness ratings. One knife, kept sharp, oiled, a lifetime of use. Now the stone that keeps it working. Skill 12. A whetstone the size of a bar of soap. A good Arkansas soft stone in a leather sleeve, 1 ounce. A field naturalist noted it in his kit records from 1906. Today, a premium guided sharpening system from the outdoor aisle runs close to $90 and comes with an instructional video. The stone has not changed in 200 million years. What changed is that shop class in American middle schools began declining in 1971 with a federal curriculum push toward college preparatory tracks, and by 1995, fewer than 1 in 10 public schools taught basic edge tool maintenance. Not banned, cut from the curriculum. State agricultural extension programs still run community workshops on whetstone technique. 1 stone, water, 20 strokes per side. Done. Edge held. Now the ground beneath you. Skill 11. Reading the ground before you lay out camp. High enough that cold air drains past you in the night. Not directly under a dead overhead branch. Not in a dry creek channel that fills without warning. Not the flattest spot available, but the spot that sheds water away from where you sleep. Experienced woodsmen called this reading the ground, and it took 30 seconds for someone who knew what to look for. Current Leave No Trace guidance correctly emphasizes durable surfaces. It does not teach the actual ground read. Forest Service trail crew training still includes the overhead hazard assessment in 2021. Nobody outlawed common sense, they replaced it with the
Now the thing under you when you lie down. Skill 10. The bough bed. 6 inches of hemlock or spruce tips laid butt down like overlapping roof shingles beneath your bedroll.
Adirondack guides and frontier woodsmen slept on this arrangement every working night of their outdoor lives, and accounts consistently describe warmer, drier sleep than what modern compressed foam pads provide below a certain cost threshold. A federal forest products field study from 1998 measured the insulating value of conifer duff at roughly equivalent to a high-quality inflatable sleeping pad. The bough bed is not permitted on developed campsites, and that restriction is reasonable. Trees do not regenerate overnight. On private land and dispersed federal camping areas, the old method still stands. Use it in the right context. Now the thing that keeps your fire alive through the night, and the one that fewer than 400 people on this continent still do correctly. Skill 9. Flint and steel with char cloth. No ferrocerium rod. A piece of high-carbon steel struck against flint or quartz sends a spark at roughly 800 degrees Celsius onto a scrap of charred cotton cloth. That char catches an ember the size of a pinpoint. You nurse that pinpoint into a tinder bundle of dry cedar bark inner fiber and blow it into flame. The ferrocerium rod was invented in 1903 and became the outdoor industry standard after the 1970s. It throws a hotter spark and requires less technique. It also made the older method look unnecessary. It is not unnecessary. It is the fire-making tradition of every human culture on this continent for 10,000 years. Practitioner registries for bushcraft instruction organizations list under 400 certified instructors in North America who can demonstrate this skill correctly under field conditions. I'm going to tell you something personal here. First solo trip, 14 years old. I told the man who taught me I did not need supervision. Wet wood, one match, a ferrocerium rod I had bought myself. Cold night, no fire, no supper. He said nothing the next morning. He set a fire steel and a small tin of char cloth on the table between us, said, "Try again when you are ready." That was the whole lesson, not humiliation. A tin passed across a table, the knowledge that came before commerce. Fire made the slow, true way. Skill 8. Finding water without a filter. Follow animal trails downhill at first light. Watch where the willow and cottonwood appear against a skyline of pine. Read the shape of a slow creek bend and dig a shallow depression a foot back from the bank. Let the sand do the filtering. Cost was time and a small shovel. A modern gravity water filter runs around $110 and clogs with regular use. Federal Hydrological Survey field guidance from 1919 still teaches seep well construction to survey field crews. The knowledge to locate clean water is not a product, it is a reed. Not banned, just replaced. Water in the vessel. Now the vessel itself. Skill 7. The tin cup and the bent wire pot hook. One enameled tin cup, one length of wire bent into a hook for lifting it from the coals. Total weight under 3 ounces. Total cost in 1935, roughly 40 cents. Does what a modern nesting titanium cook system does today at a retail price of $180. The cup boils water, it brews coffee, it holds a meal of beans. The hook lifts it from the fire without a burn. Military mountain reconnaissance training still issues single vessel cook kits to instructors because multi-component systems have multiple points of failure. 3 ounces, 1 fire, enough. Meal done. Now the fire that lasts after the meal and the one that was actually restricted. Skill 6. The buddy burner and the hobo stove. Corrugated cardboard rolled into a tuna tin and filled with melted wax. 2-hour burner for the cost of materials you would have discarded. Conservation Corps field programs built these by the thousands during the Depression. Here is the payoff on the number I mentioned at the top. In 2015, Federal Forest Service Land Management tightened fire restrictions across most western districts and reclassified any open flame device without a shutoff valve as prohibited during active restriction periods. That is the restriction. It is not a permanent or universal ban. It is seasonal, it applies to specific conditions, and it varies by district, so check yours before you go. The stated reason is fire safety in drought conditions, which is a legitimate concern. The practical outcome is that a skill your grandfather used routinely on weekend trips now requires a propane canister you purchase for every outing. In wet conditions, on legal ground, in a metal containment tray, the wax and cardboard burner still functions exactly as it always has. Check your local fire rules. Know the skill anyway. Now the one beeswax or tallow candle inside a punched tin housing gives 6 hours of usable light and a measurable amount of ambient heat. Cost is the price of a candle end. A modern headlamp retails for $35 and the batteries fail on the second night in cold weather. Nobody prohibited a candle.
Battery manufacturers marketed flashlights as freedom and modernity starting in the late 1950s, and by 1985, a candle lantern looked like something from a museum. Cold weather military field manuals published in 2018 still recommend the candle lantern as a redundant heat and light source inside a small shelter. A single candle raises interior shelter temperature by up to 10 degrees. Beeswax, punched tin, 6 hours. Light done. Now the direction it points you. Skill 4. Finding direction from a stick, a shadow, and the stars. Plant a straight stick upright in open ground. Place a small rock at the tip of its shadow. Wait 10 minutes. Place a second rock at the new tip. The line connecting them runs east to west within a reliable margin. At night, find Polaris using the 2 outer stars of the Big Dipper as a pointer, north within 1 degree. No battery required. A founding outdoor education manual devoted 23 full pages to basic celestial and shadow navigation. A 2016 revision of the same program's handbook devoted 6 pages. Not banned, phased down. The United States Naval Academy reinstated formal celestial navigation training for officer candidates in 2015, citing vulnerability to satellite signal disruption. The stars did not move, only the habit of reading them did. Direction found. Now the thing that covers all of it. Skill 3. The waxed canvas tarp. 12 feet by 12 feet of heavy cotton canvas boiled in beeswax and linseed oil. Weighs 4 pounds, packs small. Sheds rain from the outside while breathing from the inside, which means no condensation building on the underside surface during cold, sustained rain. A university natural fibers research program published a comparative shelter material study in 2019. Waxed cotton canvas outperformed coated synthetic materials in condensation management and long-term breathability under cold rain-field conditions. Cost to make one at home runs about $45 in materials. The equivalent coated synthetic tarp in an ultralight catalog runs $220. Synthetic fabric patents in the late 1930s shifted the entire outfitter inventory within 2 decades. Not banned, outsold. A waxed canvas tarp, maintained and re-waxed as needed, outlasts the person who made it. Roof set for a generation. Now the clothing and bedding beneath it. Skill 2. The wool coat and the wool blanket. Wool insulates when it is soaked. It does not melt when a spark lands on it. It does not hold body odor after multiple days of wear the way synthetic fabrics do. A surplus military wool coat in 1946 cost $3. Today, the same coat bought used runs around $60, weighs 4 pounds, and does things at a campfire that a $200 synthetic insulated jacket cannot do without accumulating burn holes. Military mountain warfare field research confirmed in 2017 that wool outerwear and wool bedding retained insulation under wet, cold field conditions by every metric measured. Synthetic fleece entered the market in 1981. Neither it nor the synthetic fabrics that came before it were bans on wool. They were sales campaigns. Your great-grandfather wore wool because it performed. It still performs. The wool coat and the wool blanket. Old order, proven. 24 skills. Every single one of them is a piece of equipment you do not have to buy. And skill 1 is not a technique. It is what the other 24 were pointing toward the entire time. Skill 1. Competence as the load you carry. That is the whole thing. Nessmuk walked into wilderness with 26 pounds not because he was competing in a minimalism challenge or following a social media trend. He carried 26 pounds because everything a modern $2,000 outfitter catalog contains he had already stored between his ears. He knew bark boils water, so he did not pack a titanium cup. He knew wool functions wet, so he did not carry a synthetic bag. He knew 3 knots build any shelter, so he left the plastic hardware at home. Every ounce he did not carry was an ounce of knowledge he had already packed. That is what your great-grandparents had, and it was not a product of poverty. It was a form of sovereignty. A person who can make fire, source water, read the ground, and sleep warm on what the surrounding land provides is not a customer for anything. That is the core of the problem from a business perspective. That is precisely why the catalogs grew thick as the skills grew thin. Nessmuk's published account taught readers. The store, in return, spent the following 140 years teaching readers they needed the store. The man with 26 pounds in 1884 walked out of those woods 6 weeks later stronger than when he entered. He did not require rescue. He did not require resupply. He was, in the oldest functional sense of the word, free. The old knowledge has a weight to it, not the physical kind, the kind that makes everything else lighter. Here is the honest close before we finish. I am not telling you to throw out what you own. I am not selling catastrophe or collapse preparedness or any variation of that. Some of what came up today is fire restricted in dry counties, and you owe it to your neighbors and your land to check the rules specific to where you camp. I am not going to pretend I know your ground better than you do. But every one of those 24 skills is part of an inheritance that a catalog printed over. You can take it back. That is all this is. So pick one. Not the whole list, just one this week. Oil a square of canvas on your porch with beeswax and linseed oil, or render the drippings from Sunday breakfast into a clean tin and set it on the shelf, or practice a bowline, a taut line hitch, and a clove hitch until your hands know the sequence without your eyes, or bank a heartwood coal under 6 inches of ash in your backyard fire pit and go check it at dawn. I banked a coal in my own fire pit last October just to test it after 2 decades of not doing it. Went out to a bed of ash the next morning, blew on it gently, had a working flame inside 90 seconds. 20 years and the methods still worked. That is what these are. What did your grandfather do when he camped? Which of these did he carry without ever calling it a skill? Leave it in the comments below. The skill that gets the most responses is the one we build the next full video around on my channel. Your grandparents knew every one of these. Somebody just did not get the chance to pass them down to you. Now they are yours again. Next time we go into the field pantry side of this, a waterproofing method a Civil War quartermaster used on canvas for an entire army using a 2-cent material, plus the 7 wild foods every frontier child could identify before age 10, and the decade those foods were quietly dropped from every American nature education curriculum. Same channel, same fire. Bring something to write in. If any of this landed for you, subscribe to my channel. Not because the number matters, because this is 300 years of practical knowledge and we are pulling it back into daylight one piece at a time. The next one might be the one that mattered most for your family. Keep the old ways.